Oh, the comma, our nemesis. What are commas for and how do we use them? Well, that depends on four things. What language are we talking about? Are we speaking? Are we writing? Are we being creative? The ways that we use commas in English are rather complex. I would say that native speakers take commas for granted, but that would be a huge lie. I've never met anyone who knows how to use commas in English who did not have to learn debatably asinine grammar rules. I say asinine because if English is the only language you speak, you may be able to convince yourself that commas are logical, but I can assure you, even if you go into another dialect of English, you'll see how arbitrary comma usage actually is. Spanish and French use commas differently, and so do German and Russian. Leave the alphabetical writing systems, and comma usage gets even stranger. For example, there are two types of commas that can be seen in Chinese and Japanese, each with their own rules of usage. Of course, you'll see similarities between languages, but you'll also see a ton of differences. Unless you are going out of your way to stress a pause in speech, I doubt you'll be seeing the use of what could be considered a spoken comma, with some exceptions depending on the language. As a counterexample, Japanese has something that you might consider a spoken comma, but that's up for debate. Standard writing requires commas to be used functionally and grammatically. Using commas separately to indicate a short pause is not considered proper and may even be confusing to read. If you feel the need to stress a pause when writing, it's most likely that you're writing something creative, or you may need to work on your standard writing. Creative writing combines elements from both spoken and written language. Even if you're not writing character dialogue, you stress pauses for dramatic or emphatic effect and for character individuality, but you also use commas functionally so that the reader is not confused. You may even remove commas completely for sake of rhythm if you're writing poetically. You could argue that all four of these instances could overlap, and you would not be wrong. That's just further proof of the arbitrary nature of commas. You can speak creatively and uniquely in any context. There isn't much stopping you. There is nothing except for standard grammar stopping you from regularly writing and speaking like this. It's legible, it's intelligible, but it's awkward. But what if a comma was required after every word grammatically? I've never seen this, but it could exist. But then the nature of commas in that language would be completely different. What if it marked a change in pronunciation? Again, I've never seen this, but apostrophes can serve this purpose, so I could imagine it. And so what if we used apostrophes instead of commas? What is an apostrophe but a raised comma? It's really not too hard to imagine. Periods instead of commas? This happens with numbers quite often in European languages and dialects. Semicolons instead of commas? This happens in several languages, including in English, but with strict rules for when to do this. Semicolons instead of question marks. This is standard in modern Greek. As you can see, some of these things actually exist as grammar in English and or in other languages, and the ones that seem extra and impossibly weird could still very well exist because of how feasible they are. But we'll continue this discussion of weird punctuation another day. For now, just remember that commas are weird, and do not behave the same way across dialects or languages. Keep in mind that native speakers, regardless of the language, have to look up how to use commas, and most likely they need to do this more than just one time. Don't stress too much though, because many people misuse commas and are still understood. But don't assume that commas can be used in the ways that you are used to in a language you're learning, or you might confuse people you're talking or writing to. Until next time, friends, happy language learning.